now let's get into our study of 2 Kings. And 2 Kings, we are in chapter 11. We just kind of barely got into this last Sunday morning as we were able to look at the first few verses where it was that we saw McElyea becoming queen. Now, McElyea is very interesting to say the least as we get to looking at her. Like we talked about, McElyea is mom, she's grandma, but she certainly does not act like mom or grandma. Because what does she do? Yeah, her son, Ahaziah, who had been king, is killed. So how she responds is she goes ahead and says, well, now I'm going to kill all my sons and all of my grandsons so that no one can take the throne from me. That's what McElyea does. But what McElyea did not know is that one of her grandsons, who was about a year old at the time, was taken and hidden in the house of the Lord by his aunt Jehosheba and her husband Jehoiada, who we find later would have been the high priest at the time. And so this is what we have going on right here during this time. But we know based on verse 3 concerning this boy named Joash that he was hidden with her, talking about Jehosheba, talking about his nurse, in the house of the Lord for 6 years while McElyea reigned over the land. So that's what we were able to cover as we began chapter 11 last week. And of course we talked about the importance of all of this is because when you get to Judah, which is where we are right now, and you think about Joash, who is he of the lineage of? Who'd you say? Joash. Think about who it is whose family he's coming from. King David, right? Why is that important? Because from the line of David would come the Messiah, so we're leading to Jesus. But also you think about the importance of the promise made in 2 Samuel chapter 7. Of course, that's pointing to the Messiah, that's pointing to Jesus. But within that promise, it's told that David would have one who would be on his throne. But the thing is, if it reaches a point that all of the males from the line of David are cut off and they are killed, then what does that mean about God's promise? His promise could not be fulfilled if that were the case. That's why this is so significant as we come into this, because the line of David was almost wiped out. But because of the courage of Jehosheba and the courage of Jehoiada, we find that the line of David is able to be preserved. God's promise is able to be fulfilled. But let's keep moving into the chapter, and what we're going to find now in verses 4 through 12 is crowning the king. That's what we're going to see in these particular verses. But let's start out and have somebody read the priest's plan to us. If somebody could read 2 Kings chapter 11, and just go ahead right now and read, go ahead and read verses 4 through 8.
In the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and brought the captains of hundreds of the bodyguards and the escorts, and brought them into the house of the Lord to him. And he made a covenant with them, and took an oath from them in the house of the Lord, and showed them the king's son. Then he commanded them, saying, this is what you shall do. 1/3 of you who come on duty on the Sabbath shall be keeping watch over the king's house. 1/3 shall be at the gate of Sur, and 1/3 at the gate behind the escorts. You shall keep the watch of the house, lest it be broken down. The 2 contingents of you who go off duty on the Sabbath shall keep the watch of the house of the Lord for the king. But you shall surround the king on all sides, every man with his weapons in his hand. And whoever comes within range, let him be put to death. You are to be with the king as he goes out and as he comes in.
So Jehoiada is laying out the plan that he has now to go ahead and announce Joash as the rightful king. But there's been some time that's elapsed here, right? How much time has elapsed since Joash first is taken and hidden in the temple? It's been 6 years, right? So now we're talking about Joash is 7 years old at this point, and now it's time that Jehoiada says, this boy needs to become king. I'm sure that a lot had happened in those 6 years. with the reign of Athaliah, but we just don't really know that much about what it is that took place. But we know, based on how her reign began, that certainly things were only going to be worse and worse and worse for the nation of Judah. So Jehoiada is now going to do what needs to be done to bolster Joash, to get him to the point that he's able to become king. And the way that Jehoiada is going to do this in his plan is that he turns to the captains of hundreds of the bodyguards and the escorts. That's what the New King James says here concerning the people that he turns to. Depending on the translation that you're using, it might say there that he sent and he brought captains of the Karaites and of the guard. Really what this is pointing to, in either way you look at it, is it's essentially saying that Jehoiada is turning to the royal secret service. That's kind of in our terms the way we'd put it, right? This is the secret service, but they were hired out from another place. And that's kind of what, at least the ESV and New American Standard, when they say Karaites, they're getting at in that. This is a map just kind of showing at least some where these people are coming from, where the Karaites were coming from. It's a smaller map, so a little bit harder to see to get everything there. But you've got Judah down here where everything's taking place in Jerusalem. But the Karaites would have been coming from up here, kind of southwest Asia Minor. So that's where we are geography-wise. And there is some connection in this to those that David would have used as kind of his bodyguard. You look at 2 Samuel chapter 20 in verse 23. 2 Samuel chapter 20 and verse 23, and there's mention there of the Kerethites. And so it's kind of understood that the Karaites, the Kerethites, would have been speaking of the same group of people. And so evidently they were known as being a very good source of protection, these royal bodyguard, this secret service. And Jehoiada is calling them, and he's asking them to come into the house of the Lord, where it is that he makes a covenant with them. In this covenant, he's going to then certainly be pointing them to God. He's going to be, making sure that everyone's going to be loyal, everybody's going to be on board. And through this, he then is going to, most importantly, reveal Joash to them. Show them the king's son. And then he gives out what his plan is going to be, verses 5 through 8, as it was read just a moment ago. And then we kind of see the different function that each of these thirds of the group are going to have. 1/3, it said, was going to keep watch over the king's house. Well, that's important because who would have been in the king's house at this time? Queen Athaliah. So we're going to keep watch there and make sure that she's not going to come in and disrupt things. So you watch there. You've got another third that would have been at the gate of Sur. So this would have been an entrance point. And then another third are going to be at the gate behind the escorts. And so you kind of have all of this there. And then for those who were coming off duty on that Sabbath day, well, they were to go ahead and keep watch of the house, lest it be broken down. So that's everything that we have going on. And then there's some more specific instruction given, verses 7 and 8, that they are to keep the watch of the house of the Lord for the king. And if anybody were to come near the king, what were they instructed to do? You kill them, right? You do not let anybody come near the king. And that is certainly the point of the bodyguard, of the secret service, that you don't let anyone come near the one that you are protecting. You are to be with the king as he goes out and as he comes in. And then we keep going and we get into verses 9 through 12, where we see the plan being carried out, and we see that Joash is going to be crowned king. Somebody go ahead and read verses 9 through 12.
So the captains of the hundreds did according to all that Jehoiada the priest commanded. Each of them took his men who were to be on duty on the Sabbath with those who were going off duty on the Sabbath, and came to Jehoiada the priest. And the priest gave the captains of the hundreds the spears and shields which had belonged to King David, that were in the temple of the Lord. Then the escorts stood, every man with his weapon in his hand, all around the king, from the right side of the temple to the left side of the temple, by the altar and the house. And he brought out the king's son, put the crown on him, and gave him the testimony. They made him king, and anointed him, And they clapped their hands and said, Long live the king.
So you go back into verse 9 and you see that all of these captains of the hundreds, these bodyguards, they're doing what it is that they were commanded to do by Jehoiada. They've instructed all of their men, and they go to their specific places, and they're doing what it is Jehoiada had asked them to do. Verse 10, we find that Jehoiada is actually going to help arm these men. And what is it that he arms the men with? Spears and shields from who? From David. Now, there are some who have taken and they've said, well, this was probably, being as it was kept in the temple, that this was probably something that was more ceremonial. You think about it times in different countries, and I mean, I guess even we do it now to an extent, but you kind of have military parades, and you do things that are a little more for show and a little more processional. Think about... well, I don't even know what I'm trying to think about right now. But what I'm getting at in this is there are people who say basically that these weapons would not have really been dangerous weapons, right? There may have been a little bit of a sharpness to it, but it's going to be a little bit duller on the end, right? Something that's more for show. It's just tradition. It's procedure that you would bring these out when it is that there's going to be a new king announced, or you're going to parade them through. Do what? More ceremonial, right? But what, I don't know that I agree with that, because who is it that's being armed? It's the bodyguard. It's the Secret Service, right? Who is it that they are protecting the king from? From Queen McElyea, the one who's already killed all of her sons and grandsons. And what do you think she's going to do when she finds out that she missed one? She's going to want to kill him. And so if these are purely ceremonial, it's really not going to do any good at protecting the king. So I would believe that these are going to be some true weapons that were still dangerous and were still deadly. But I think it's also important, again, to remember who these weapons were from. They're from King David. So King David is still providing even for his family years down the road. When his family, when his light was almost completely extinguished and wiped out, now King David is still protecting his family. That's something that was set in place that I'm sure David never thought was going to happen when he brings the weapons into the temple and they would be stored there. But here we have David providing, protecting, even still for his own. And I think that that's a powerful thing to consider as we look at this and think about God's providence through it all. But you come into verse 11. In verse 11, we find that now the escorts, this bodyguard, that they have come and they're standing every man. They each have their weapon, and they're all surrounding the king. And the picture is that it gives is that basically you just have the king in the middle. You have this 7-year-old boy in the middle, and then all surrounding him is this royal bodyguard. And then on top of that, when you come into verse 12, where it is that they bring, of course, the king's son, and now you have Jehoiada putting the crown on him, giving him the testimony. That's going to be connected to the law of Moses that was given several different times. We find the law being referred to as the testimony. If you're taking notes, you can note Exodus 25, verse 16, and Exodus 31, verse 18. So again, that's Exodus 25, verse 16, Exodus 31, verse 18, where the testimony is directly connected to the law of Moses. So as Jehoiada is crowned, the law of Moses, the testimony is given. They make him king, they anoint him, and all the people there, long live the king. Right? That's what's going on here. You have a King James there. It says, God save the king. And so that's what's going on. They are announcing Joash as king. And you have that many people in the temple clapping and yelling and shouting, God save the king, long live the king. This amazing historical event that's going on. Do you think the sound of that's going to be drifting out of the temple? All of the clapping, all of the noise, all of this, you hear king, 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 just repeated over and over. And who do you think is going to catch wind of this? Queen McElyea. And certainly she is not going to be happy when she becomes to investigate. But to get to that, we first see the response of all the people of the land. We're going to see the people of the land is a phrase that's repeated now at this point all the way down through the end of the chapter. And so that's why I've called it the people of the land. But within this, we're going to find Athaliah's response and, of course, her death. Somebody read for us, if you would, 2 Kings 11, verses 13 to 16.
Now when Athaliah heard the noise of the escorts of the people, she came to the people in the temple of the Lord. When she looked, there was the king standing by a pillar, according to custom. And the leaders and the trumpeters were by the king. All the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. So Athaliah tore her clothes and cried out, "Treason, treason."
So verses, go ahead, Johnny, if you don't mind. Go ahead and read 15 and 16 as well.
And Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains of the hundreds, the officers of the army, and said to them, "Take her outside under guard and slay with the sword whoever follows her." For the priest had said, "Do not let her be killed in the house of the Lord." So they seized her, and she went by way of the horses' entrance into the king's house, and there she was killed.
So you look at verses 13 and 14, and you find now Athaliah is going to investigate what it is that she's been hearing. She heard the noise, it says, of the escorts and of the people, so she came to the people in the temple of the Lord. I wonder how long it had been since Athaliah had even gone to the temple. She certainly was not one concerned with the God of heaven. And we'll see, even as we keep going, and we'll get to here in just a moment, some history even that shows her direct connection to the worship in the temple of Baal. And so she would not have been one who frequented the temple, but she goes to investigate all that's going on because, after all, she is queen, and she's probably not heard that much noise or seen a crowd like that at the temple in perhaps, well, who knows how long it had been. But she's going to see, and when she gets there, what does she find? She finds that there is a little boy who's standing by the pillar, this ceremonial, customary pillar, where it is that the king would stand. And she sees on this boy's head the crown. And not just that, but she maybe notices that he's kind of glistening a little more than normal, because you remember how it is that they would anoint him? So they're pouring this oil over his head. So there he is, perhaps still dripping the oil down. Little boy in the temple, everybody's clapping and yelling, "Long live the king." And she's sitting here, and I wonder, did she maybe see that boy and have some flashbacks to her own sons when they were 7 years old? Because surely there'd have been some resemblance there. She didn't realize, evidently, that she had forgotten to kill a grandson when she killed all of them at the beginning of chapter 11, and now her worst nightmare's coming true. Because in her mind, she's yelling treason. This is treachery, treason, treason. She's tearing her clothes, verse 14, and she cannot stand what she sees because, well, she knows that her reign is coming to an end. But really, as she's the one yelling treason, treason, she was the one who was treasonous. Because Joash had the right to the throne all along. And so then we find verse 15 that Jehoiada gives the command to take and to kill Athaliah, but to take her outside of the temple. And it's also noted there that they were to do what for anybody that followed her out? They were to kill them as well. But when we keep reading, who's the only person that we find that's killed? Just her. That shows the response of the people, that they were in favor of Joash and not her. But that's verse 16, that they would take her out of the temple, and they killed her, it said, by the horse's entrance into the king's house. There she was killed. And so we find that the wicked queen has died. But then as we keep looking, and we see, you had something, Johnny?
I'm just going to say, you sort of mentioned it there, a little ironic that the queen goes through the horse's gate.
Yeah, that would not be normal there. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that one, of where it is. That shows how desperate she was trying to get out of there. But of course, the bodyguards still found her and did what it was that needed to be done. And so Athaliah has been killed, and now we're going to see the people trying to make an effort now to return to the Lord. Somebody read verses 17 and 18.
Then Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people. They should be the Lord's people, and also between the king and the people. And all the people of the land went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They thoroughly broke in pieces its altars and images, and killed Matan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And the priest appointed officers over the house of the Lord.
So verse 17, now that Athaliah has been killed, Joash alone holds the right to the throne, and Jehoiada makes a covenant between, it says, the Lord, the king, and the people. And what is this covenant all about? That they are going to serve the Lord, that they are going to be faithful to the Lord, that they are going to be loyal to Him, that He alone is going to be their God. And this is Jehoiada in this pivotal moment for the nation, because who is it that's been ruling for the past several years now? You've had Athaliah, and before Athaliah, who'd you have? You had Ahaziah, right? And so you've had this track record now of some wicked and evil kings that were turning the people of Judah away from God. And now Jehoiada says, this is our chance to make it right. This is our chance to turn the tide. Here we have before us a wonderful and a great opportunity, and we need to make sure that we are faithful, that we are loyal, that we will serve the God of heaven and Him alone. And so he makes this covenant, and then he makes a covenant between the king and the people. Right? So it's not just the covenant of the people, the king, and God, but now the people and the king, that they will serve him, that they will respect, that they will obey his command as he's doing what he should be doing in his covenant to the Lord. And then immediately after this covenant, verse 18, what do we find? All the people of the land march from the temple of the Lord to the temple of whom? To the temple of Baal. And what do? Tear it down. And they kill the priest that was there in the temple. And so that is what it is that's going on right here. Now it's interesting as we look at this. And I totally missed a question that I had here. I guess I should look at my notes some. I did have a question about some of what we talked about with the covenant, so we'll skip right over that. But the temple of Baal being destroyed, the priests being killed there before the altar of Baal. Josephus, in his history of the Jews, he records that actually this particular temple of Baal in Jerusalem was built by Athaliah and Jehoram when he was king. And Josephus says within his history there that it was built, quote, to the dishonor of the God of their fathers and to the honor of Ahab. So that's the history of the temple of Baal in Jerusalem. That Athaliah did so to the dishonor of the God of heaven, but built this temple in order to honor whom? Wicked Ahab from Israel.
Just kind of back to what we were talking about. So when Athaliah killed all his sons and then later Joash becomes king, and he's a child, so he has to have instruction from Jehoiada. So I kind of have to wonder, was that almost like a cleansing? Not that what she did was right, but like a cleansing of all those people to finally get to a child who can be molded. It's just like we have to become like children in order to, when we obey the gospel, we have to get to have that mindset of innocence and become like a child. And so I just kind of wonder, was that kind of the only way to get people coming back to Christ? Was you have this child who's going to be king, but he's going to be molded by the priest who will kind of mentor him in that way and lead him in that direction.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely something to that. If you didn't hear Kay, she was kind of looking at it and asking, is maybe the fact that Athaliah going and killing her sons and grandsons, and then this one being left behind, that now he's 7 years old, that he's obviously going to need counsel and guidance, and that's what Jehoiada is going to give to him, and we'll find that more especially in chapter 12, that mentoring that Jehoiada does. But Kay's question in that wondering is maybe this is a type of cleansing, that maybe this is what Judah needed, is a child. And Kay referenced in the New Testament that we must become like children, that we need to be able to be shaped and molded in that way. And I think that there very possibly is something to that in this, that would also really wake the nation of Judah up, because they needed to be able to stop and really recognize what was going on and what it is that brought them to that point, that now they need to get it right. And they're showing some good signs of that right now, as they immediately are making good on their covenant to the Lord and going now to the temple of Baal and destroying it in Jerusalem. So when we think about this, as it relates to all that's been going on, and even with that destruction of the temple of Baal in Jerusalem, it's going to mirror what was happening in Israel at the same exact time. I'll get to you in a second, Johnny. But this destruction of the temple of Baal mirrors what was going on in Israel. You go back to 2 Kings chapter 10, 2 Kings chapter 10, and you look in verses 25 down through verse 28, and what is it that Jehu had done in Israel? Jehu destroyed the temple of Baal, and even it says verse 28, destroyed Baal from Israel. And so Baal has been wiped out, destroyed, but Baal was probably the primary one being worshipped at the time, going back to Ahab. Well, because of Ahab and his commitment to this false god Baal, what is it that happened in Jerusalem from Athaliah and her husband Jehoram? To honor Ahab, according to what Josephus recorded, they built a temple of Baal. So now we even have in Jerusalem that this temple of Baal is being destroyed and cut out. So thinking of the covenant and thinking of this destruction, I think there's good lesson that can be learned. And I'll come back to you here in a moment, Johnny. But I want us to think about this question. What lesson or lessons might we learn based on the destruction of Baal's temple? Think about a covenant that's made in the previous verses of 2 Kings chapter 11. If you're going to make a covenant,
We'll have to replace that number one.
right.
Is when we get rid of the bad habit, we have to replace it with something good.
All right, so you get rid of the bad to replace with the good. Of course, here they're committing to the good in God, and now they're going to make sure that they're not going to go back to the bad. And so absolutely, when it is that we are trying to turn things around, we can't just leave a hole where the bad was. It wouldn't have been enough just to destroy the temple of Baal, but not actually commit themselves to God, right? They are going to do what needs to be done to get rid of the bad, make the commitment to God to do the good. Jesse?
Thinking about commitment, it has to be 100%. In Zephaniah chapter 1, it talks about how they worship not only Baal, but they also try to worship God at the same time. So that idea of like standing on the fence, trying to do both sides.
Right, yeah, you're all in or all out.
They would have made a commitment to not remove the temple of Baal. It would have been as if they never made a commitment.
Yeah, Jesse said you got to be 100% and kind of made some connection with Zephaniah 1 and the thought of sort of standing on the fence. That it wouldn't have done good to commit to God, but then leave everything still there for Baal and still try to have the best of both worlds. It can't be that way. When you make the commitment, you've got to be all in or you're all out. We're either wholly committed to God or we are not committed to God, and there is no in between. We cannot be loyal to God and keep those competitors like Baal nearby. If it is that we know that we have a struggle with something in our lives, and we know that we have a real challenge of if this thing is nearby, if this thing is always in my sight, if I always hear about it, eventually I'm going to give in and do it. And especially if I have an inclination toward that already, and I know I shouldn't, but I keep hearing it, I keep seeing it, I keep it nearby because I'm unwilling to completely let it go, then back to Kay's point, to Jesse's point, we haven't fully committed to God, and we haven't fully gotten rid of that bad in our life. if we're still holding on to our Baal, if you will, we made some good application last week when it came to the destruction of the temple in Samaria, the destruction of Baal there, and thought about some of the idols perhaps in our life. If we're holding them and keeping them in our home when we know that we have a problem with it already, but we say to ourselves, well, it can stay and I'm not going to give in, eventually I will do and I will give in. We have to be willing to destroy that idol, whatever it is, in our life so that we do not go back to it. And then another question I have on this, and then I'll get to you, Johnny. I've not forgotten about you. But another question I have on this, thinking about the destruction of the temple of Baal in Jerusalem and that destruction going back to chapter 10 in Samaria. If you were a worshiper of Baal in either nation, what kind of message do you think is being sent to them right now? You better turn to God. Your God, God in quotes, your idol, this Baal, he can do nothing. He cannot stand before the Lord because the Lord alone is God and all the people should follow him. And so after it is that the temple of Baal was destroyed, you look at the end of verse 18, and you find the priest talking about Jehoiada, appointed officers over the house of the Lord. So he has done what needs to be done to try and now restate and restore this true worship in Jerusalem. Johnny?
I was going to say, I can't remember exactly where I found it, but McElyea was either the sister or the daughter of Ahab. So this not only ended the worship of Baal, but it fulfilled the prophecy ending Ahab's lineage.
Yeah, it's still taking care of that family of Ahab. And it's amazing just how much impact and just how much influence that Ahab had on so many people, not just in his own nation now, but even the nation neighboring him. And that goes to show just how much evil influence can impact us. You think about a little leaven leavens the whole lump. You think about do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits, right? And we'll tell ourselves, well, no, it's not going to affect me. It's not going to affect me. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. I wonder how many people in Jerusalem or how many people in Samaria, how many people in Judah or in Israel maybe had some of that mindset when it came to their wicked leaders, and you see just how much bad it did for them. But thankfully, it seems like things are turning around, and the worship of Baal has been destroyed, those temples have been destroyed, and now we have the king is going to sit on his throne. So let's have somebody finish off chapter 11 and read verses 19 through 21.
Then he took the captains of the hundreds, the bodyguards, the escorts, and all the people of the land. And they brought the king down from the house of the Lord and went by way of the gate of the escorts to the king's house. Then he sat on the throne of the kings. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet, for they had slain Athaliah with the sword in the king's house. Jehoshaphat was 7 years old when he became king.
So verse 19, we find after this destruction of the temple of Baal, after the officers had been appointed over the house of the Lord being the temple, that now you have the priests, and so Jehoiada is taking the captains, these bodyguards, and the escorts, and all the people of the land, and they are now parading the boy to his home. They are bringing him down from the house of the Lord. They go by the way of the gate of the escorts to the king's house, and then what does the boy do? He sits on his throne. Why do you think that picture is important?
Because they were nearly wiped out.
Exactly.
It was nearly, it was nearly kept from happening because of his grandmother. And then for him to actually be found as king, that's a big change in everything for what God's purpose for us would be.
Absolutely. It restores that faith in God that he's going to make good on his word, that he's going to fulfill those promises. Because like Benjamin pointed out, this almost didn't happen. That if this didn't happen, thinking back to what we talked about towards the beginning of class, If this doesn't happen, then that means God did not fulfill his word. And if you can't trust God to fulfill his word in this, then how can I trust him on this promise? Or how can I trust him on this promise? But this is God making good on his word. And so we have the boy now sitting on his throne. That is, sitting on the throne of David. Did I see your hand, Dad? No. I do see Johnny's hand.
I will say this also fulfills his promise to David that he would have one of his lineage on the throne.
He still has the son on the throne.
Restored David's lineage to the throne.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it shows again that faithfulness of God as he's fulfilling his word and doing what it is that was said would be done. Verse 20, we then find the reaction, and there's kind of a mixed reaction here. Verse 20, all of the people of the land are doing what? Rejoicing. So I can just picture that you have all the people of the land who've come to the temple. They've come there and they've gathered together, and this amazing event has occurred, and they know that wicked Athaliah is no more. Now Joash is king, and they've all made this covenant, this pledge between themselves, the king, and God himself, that they will be faithful. They've taken and they've destroyed the temple of Baal, and they're going on their way now rejoicing. But what else do we find in the city? It was quiet. Now, there are a couple of possibilities with this. One possibility would be that after kind of the events of the day have happened, that now as the people are reflecting, Athaliah was queen after all. And so out of respect for her, then maybe they had a moment there where there was some silence, some solemnity towards the events that had gone on. That's a possibility. But another possibility, and one that I think might be a little more, or a little closer to what actually was going on perhaps, is that you have all of the people of where? Of the land. This would have been some of your landowners. This would have been the ones who are not in the city but outside of the city, who are working the fields, a little more agricultural. So you have some of the more rural people who we've seen from the examples in Israel. When you get outside of the city center, you find more glimpses of faith in the people. Maybe this is what's happening, that outside of the city center of Jerusalem, you have these people who wanted to do right, wanted to get back to what was right. All of the people of the land are rejoicing that yes, Baal is gone out of Jerusalem. We've made this commitment. We now have a king that's going to be leading us in the right way. But in Jerusalem proper, in the city center, maybe the case was that not everybody was so excited. Because what had they become so accustomed and so used to? Going to that temple of Baal. Worshiping in that temple of Baal. They didn't want to be doing things the right way. They'd gotten used to not doing things the right way. And we'll find when we get into chapter 12 and make some parallel and connection into the Chronicles, that a time is going to come when for Joash, he no longer has the positive influence of Jehoiada in his life, and immediately the influences are turning him to bad. And so it seems like there was an element of people, at least in the city, who were not thrilled with the events of that day. But you find the people of the land rejoicing, but the city was quiet, for they had slain Athaliah with the sword in the king's house. And then verse 21 says that Jehoash was 7 years old when he became king. Jehoash is still Joash. We find different times, it's not the first time we've seen this, where there's kind of more than one name given for the specific king. You kind of have a longer name, a shorter name. I don't know all the specifics as to why. You see some of that. Sometimes there's a little bit of differentiation given, because think about Jehoram. You had Jehoram and Joram, but Joram is also Jehoram. But you have a Joram, Jehoram in Israel, and a Joram, Jehoram in Judah. And with Joash, you're going to have a Joash in Judah and a Joash in Israel. So some of that is just to give a little differentiation as we read through, but as much differentiation that's given, it still confuses me. Jim?
You know, for over 6 years, people there assumed that the lineage of David was completely wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God didn't keep his promise. Now they see that God has kept his promise, but his lineage is still
And that's one of the biggest lessons to take going through, is that God kept his promise, right? God is faithful to his word, and the lineage of David was still there. And like you say, for 6 years, the people are probably thinking, well, the line of David is done, right? What hope is there? What reason is there to be faithful to God? Maybe we should now go to this temple of Baal, for those who were holding out hope. Who knows what was going on in their minds, but we know now God was faithful, God is true. So a few of the takeaways we can take from this chapter before we get that second bell. First lesson, evil knows no end. That goes back to what we talked about with McElyea. Despite the fact that she is mom, despite the fact that she is grandma, she knows no limits, because her mind was set on becoming queen, which meant I've got to get my own sons and my own grandsons out of the way. And like we talked about, when we have our mind set on evil, no, it might not be that we are physically going to kill our sons or grandsons or family, but we'll do what it takes, even if it's to the neglect of family, to get the evil that we want. Evil knows no end. The next promise, or next takeaway, and this is the big one we've been talking about throughout it all, God's promises are sure. God is faithful, God is loyal to his word, and we can trust him. Lastly, God alone is God, and we should live for him. This is what we find in that destruction of the temple of Baal and in the covenants that are made between the people and the king and the Lord. God alone is God. We should live for him. And so we'll pick up, Lord willing, next week, beginning in 2 Kings 12, looking at Joash's reign.